Over the next few videos, we're going to dive into CloudKit. Starting with this one, which is just an introduction, telling you what it is, what it can do, and then we're going to talk about some of the pros and cons, because just like every other programming decision, there are trade-offs. There are certain types of apps that would be great for CloudKit. Certain type of apps, you should stay away from CloudKit. So we're going to talk about the different, pros and cons. So CloudKit was announced and introduced in 2014, and it's essentially Apple's backend service. If you're familiar with Firebase or you've heard of Firebase and I can build your backend there, to put it simply, it's essentially that, but Apple's first-party version. And it's available on all Apple platforms. So if you're developing a Mac app, an iOS app, a watch app, you can get access to it. And it does power, a lot of the apps that you're used to using every day. Notes, photos, the Apple News app, the WWDC app that we're all about to be using a lot. Those are all powered by CloudKit. And on that note, that should let you know that it doesn't have any scaling issues, right? Apple uses it with like millions of users, so you're good to go there. Now let's talk about the price. Like, how much does this cost? Well, it's pretty much going to be free. Let me pull up the cost structure here. So here's the main CloudKit site. I'll link to this in the description of the video. We'll scroll down. You can, check this out if you want to learn more. There's a dashboard we're going to touch on in a future video. Here, like I said, millions of users are relying on these CloudKit apps. I already mentioned that. But here's the pricing thing, right? Reach more users for free. So CloudKit provides a generous amount of free data transfer and storage, making it easy to build, test, and grow your app. So essentially what they've said, and they've said this in previous WWDCs, is they want CloudKit to be free, but they don't want people to be able to abuse it. So that's kind of what these limits are for. But on this website, you can kind of drag this and see your pricing. So I'll scroll down because my screen's kind of blown up. There you can see at the bottom, total cost $0. But you can see you get more storage and data transfer the more users you have. So it scales up with you, as you can see. And then an interesting thing here, in the next video, we're going to talk terminology. But to get ahead of myself a little bit, there's public databases and private databases. Think of the public database like the Apple News app, where like everybody can see the news articles. Think of the private database as like your own personal notes app, where like your notes are your private notes. Nobody else can see those. So in the private database, that data and all that stuff goes against the person's like personal iCloud drive, allocation, whatever they have. So if you are building an app that is very heavily reliant on like private data, then you'll probably never hit this because most of your stuff will go against the users. So anyway, like I said, the idea is for it to scale with you, and Apple wants it to be free. They just don't want people to abuse it. That's why there are like certain limitations. And if your app like really, really blows up, there are overage charges, as you can see here. Asset storage is 3 cents per gigabyte, et cetera. You can read those. But if you hit those, yes, it's going to cost you money, but that's probably a good problem to have if you exceed these limits. I think you'll be happy to have that problem. So that is the pricing. Essentially, it's free. Now let's discuss the pros and cons of why you may choose CloudKit over something, like a Firebase. So talk about the pros first. So one big thing you get is called automatic authentication, right? There's no need for building a login screen or managing emails, usernames, and password, right? It's linked to the user's iCloud account. Like, you've used Notes, you've used Calendar, you've used the WWDC app. You don't have to log into that. It's just tied to your iCloud account. Well, when you build an app on CloudKit, you get that exact same functionality. So you'll see in DubDubGrub, when we build that, like there's no login screen. We just automatically have a user created that is connected to their iCloud account. Very nice. So another benefit is the syncing of data across devices. As an Apple user, I assume you have an iPhone and a MacBook if you're taking this course, you know the beauty and the power of, taking a note on your phone and then it just magically syncing instantly to your MacBook, that kind of stuff. That is CloudKit in action. That's kind of what powers, the ecosystem of Apple. So again, if you're building apps on CloudKit, you can build in that functionality into your apps as well. And another benefit is that it is Apple's first-party supported framework. Like some of their major apps, Notes, Photos, News, are built on CloudKit. So that's a pretty good sign that it's going to be supported moving forward. Ask anybody that got burned by the Parse SDK getting bought by Facebook and then going out. And then when Google bought Firebase, people thought the same thing was going to happen. I think Firebase is going to be around, but the point is, that is always a risk that Google could just shut down Firebase. I don't think they will. I think they like the data too much, but it is a risk. And this being first party is great. Not to mention, you don't have to deal with like CocoaPods or Swift packages or, all the bulk of the SDK. If you've ever brought in a Google SDK or the Facebook SDK, those are pretty heavy. Don't got to mess with any of that. It's a simple import CloudKit. You're good to go. So I'm just a fan of using first party stuff over third party stuff. Also, if you want to build sharing into your app, that's pretty simple. Again, the Notes app, if you've ever collaborated on a note or shared a photo album with another iCloud user, that kind of collaboration, that's built into CloudKit. And then finally, privacy, right? You know, Apple's real big on privacy. Like I mentioned during the cost stuff, you have a private database that you can give to your user, and even you as a developer of your app, like you can't go into your backend and see what's in, you know, that person's private database. Completely private, completely hidden from developers. So again, if you're building the type of app, DubDubGrub is not going to use the private database for obvious reasons, right? We want everybody to see the locations. We want everybody to see, you know, who's at what location. But again, if you are building an app where maybe a user does create their own notes, or maybe they're managing their business on your app and you want that to be private, there you go. You can ensure your customers are going to have great, you know, Apple quality privacy. And now on to the cons, because, you know, it's not all good. This is Apple only. So for your product, your company, your business, whatever, you do plan on building an Android app, this might not be the best way to go. On that note, real quick, from a self-proclaimed fanboy, so take it with a grain of salt, I think a lot of people default to, I have to have an Android app, I have to have an iOS app, have to cover both. Again, just what I wanted to point out, kind of the theme of this product about being niche and narrow. Look on the Mac App Store. There are tons of apps that only support the Apple ecosystem that are doing very, very well. So I'm not going to tell you which way to go, but don't completely rule out an Apple-only product. And again, I'm a fanboy, but there's plenty of companies doing very well with just that. Now, a note on that, if you do have kind of like a website version, there is something called CloudKit JS. We're obviously not going to touch that, JS for JavaScript, but that will allow you to access, you know, your CloudKit databases from your website. Now, another small con is that you do have to have an Apple developer account, the one that costs $99 a year, in order to build with CloudKit. Now, I assume a lot of you probably already have that, but you know, if you're just getting started and you haven't decided if you really want to pursue this seriously yet, maybe you haven't spent that $99 yet, but that is required. So just want to put that out there. That could be looked at as a con if you're just starting to, you know, practice with it and develop with it. And then the last con is that if you hook up an app with CloudKit, you cannot transfer that app. Now, what do you mean transfer the app? So let's say we did build DubDubGrub as a real product, and someone came along and says, Sean, that is an amazing product. I want to expand that to other conferences all around the world. I want to buy your app off you for $1 million. Whatever, we can dream, right? Well, in this case, I would have to give them my entire developer account, because with CloudKit, you can't just sell that app. Now, that is a minor inconvenience in my opinion, because it is a very solvable problem. A lot of people probably aren't going to like the answer, but how I solved it, because my app that I'll build someday, Creator View, is in that area where I think I can build Creator View to have the potential to get acquired someday. So from the start, I created a separate developer account, you know, paying the extra $99 a year. So I'm paying for my personal account and that account. And I understand money is different for everybody, and paying an extra $100 a year sucks. But I'm preparing for the fact that if I decide to build a company around this, decide to build a startup around it, or it does, you know, get acquired, then I have already like prepared for that. So it's an annoying problem that you can't transfer it, but it is definitely solvable for the low price of $100 a year. But I just want to paint the picture, because a lot of people see that about CloudKit and then rule it out immediately. And I'm like, if you really want to use CloudKit and it works with your app, like, and you plan on your app getting acquired later for, you know, when apps get acquired, it's not for $100, right? We're talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of dollars. So the $100 a year is a small price to pay to have that flexibility. But hopefully Apple fixes that in the future, because it is annoying. Now let's talk about, you know, why I chose CloudKit for DubDubGrub and like how that's a fit, just as like an example, right? Well, duh, I wanted to teach it in a course, so put that aside. But I knew I was going to be creating my own data. Like I mentioned before, we're not, you know, using the Yelp API or pulling data from elsewhere. I knew I was going to curate and create my own data set. So I knew I needed a backend as a service, right? So now that we're in this lane, okay, do I use Firebase? Do I use CloudKit? Well, this app is for iOS developers that are going to WWDC, an iOS developer conference. So the likelihood of needing Android is probably none. Okay, so that problem's out. And then I'm just a really big fan of that automatic sign-on, right? Who likes building login screens and having to have your user, you know, do the whole login, then you got to do the whole forgot password. Like, it's just so annoying. So to completely take that off the table and just have the automatic authentication, that's a huge win for me. So I love that. And then finally, I'm just a fan of first-party stuff. Anytime I have the choice between a first-party thing and a third-party thing, I'm pretty much always going to go first-party unless it's just horrible. So that's a brief overview of, what CloudKit is, some of the pros and cons, and how I thought about it and why I thought it was a good fit for Grub, aside from the fact that I wanted to teach it. All right, we're gonna dive deeper into the future videos. Let's keep it moving.